record this. All right, and for our official welcome, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Again, my name is Lynn Kleinmeyer. I am one of your ITEC board members, and I'm going to let our other panelists today kind of introduce themselves in just a second, but we are so excited that you are joining us for this conversation about supporting data stewardship and really giving you an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the Student Data Privacy Consortium. And so I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Dan Rader. Dan, if you want to go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Dan Rader. I'm also on the ITEC board and representing ITEC today, along with Lynn. I am the technology coordinator at Roll and Story Schools. And so obviously the student data privacy is a big issue for me as well, overseeing all of our students and all the data that we happen to keep on them now. So.
Awesome. And joining us outside of the ITEC board, we have two incredibly vast wealths of knowledge joining us, Dave Fringer and Jay Pennington, and I will let them introduce themselves. You know, rock, paper, scissors for who goes first.
All right, Lynn, I'll go first since you said me first. On the next slide, you'll see that we're listed in the opposite order. Anyway, I'm Dave Frey. I'm Executive Director at Green Hills AEA in Southwest Iowa, and we're excited to bring to you an upcoming preview of some work that's being done that we're hoping to launch later in the fall around student data privacy, really some tools and supports to help Iowa districts make really good decisions about data privacy, and also provide some out-of-the-box tools so it's easier for districts to take care of that data privacy requirement.
So I'm Jay Pennington, Bureau Chief at the Iowa Department of Education, and really appreciate the ITEC board for this opportunity to begin to communicate a lot of the good work that Dave and some of the other media directors have partnered with the department to do. So, you know, really the purpose is to build awareness of you know, what we're working on and what's to come related to the Student Data Privacy Consortium and what we're calling the Iowa Student Data Privacy Consortia. So again, a partnership between the Department of Ed and the AEAs, but really with the intent of having tools available for districts to utilize if you want to. This is completely voluntary. This is, I think, just the beginning, sort of scratching the surface of the many needs that exist across our state in terms of building up more tools and building really awareness and resources for folks around student information, how it should be kept. And just to be clear, we're focusing beginning with the actual agreements, legal agreements that districts sign as sort of the starting point for what we're going to focus on with this alliance. So what is the Student Data Privacy Consortium? It began in 2015, and you can see this URL in the lower right-hand corner. Student Data Privacy Consortia is actually an element of a larger effort from the Access for Learning community, which is also formerly known as the SIP Association. But they've added these privacy consortia really to create a more coherent ecosystem around not just data definition and data use, which is really within that school interoperability framework specification. They certainly still have the SIF, what's now called Unity standard out there, but they've also created a sort of second business line focused on creating a secure ecosystem that includes standards around how you define students, courses, etc., and move that data seamlessly from entity to entity, but also wrapping that around security. And so this effort is, there are, and Dave will get the numbers correct, but about half of the states have similar alliances. So we in Iowa are just embarking on ours, but there are other states that are much, much further along, in which, you know, their SDPC registry. So let's say I am Illinois. Illinois has, you know, hundreds of student data privacy agreements signed by various vendors that have agreed to a common set of terms and how that data will be secured. So point is that A4L is acting as the sort of the coordinator to assist states in having their own alliance. So this work all started in 2015, really sort of a ground up effort, not so much a state down approach, focused on tactical student data privacy pain points. So as part of the A4L community, they created, or they are a 501(c), and again, sort of an offshoot of the SIF Association. They're really focused on working with schools, districts, regional partners like our AEAs, or in some states, the BOCES, and oftentimes within the states, there is a you know, Department of Ed presence, but in most cases, it's either a regional agency, or in some cases, there's actually consortia or nonprofits that are taking the lead in terms of managing these alliances. But districts, you know, are sort of the key folks, the key audience that we're trying to assist. So creating governance, oversight, and resource support, and the SDPC and the, you know, this alliance is created or managed through membership monies, which the Department of Ed is underwriting for our alliance. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and he's going to take you through some of the work that he's been doing. And just to be clear, Dave and the AEAs are doing the heavy lifting on this, which I really, really appreciate, in order to be the main resources and force behind an SDPC Iowa Alliance.
Thanks, Jay. So the national organization has goals, and the Iowa team who is implementing the Iowa Alliance has simply adopted the same goals. We found it to be a very efficient way to vet and publish goals. So the 5 goals are around establishing a community of stakeholders. That's you. If you're either participating in the webinar or watching later, that's you. You are going to be the community of stakeholders if you want to participate. There's a goal to create good tools and resources for constituents to be able to use to be more efficient in vetting agreements and not having to reinvent the wheel each time you enter into a new agreement for software, download an app. We want to leverage partnerships, and I think the best example of this is many school districts in Iowa are customers of several large companies who have vested interest in student data. A good example would be the student information system space, whether it's PowerSchool or Infinite Campus or JMC. There's 3 vendors, but there's hundreds of districts. So if we were able to leverage the partnership of the SDPC to create a single data sharing agreement with those 3 entities, that would be leveraging the partnership. we want to identify things that have on the ground and real world impact. And we've started to do this with a very, very small team, but as we roll this out in the fall and then in subsequent years and iterations, we hope that the voice from the community becomes, the driver of what is coming next in terms of SDPC work in Iowa. And then last but not least is to develop a clearinghouse of data privacy operational issues and take those back to the national organization and work on them at the highest levels with other state alliances and with the vendor community who are also members of this at the national organization level. So next slide. So alliances can be a number of different things. It could be a group of school districts. If just a few school districts in Southeast Iowa wanted to form their own alliance, you could certainly do that. There's no requirement for a certain number of schools or even any sort of structure to be an alliance, but there are some ways to become an alliance. So you could do that on your own. Service agencies like AEAs in Iowa, BOCES in New York, EdSACs in Kansas, they are oftentimes either the convener of the alliance or potentially working together. Like in Iowa, all 9 AEAs have decided that this is important enough that we're going to work at this as statewide work. And then departments of education in some states are the alliance, but not in Iowa. As Jay said, partnership between LEA, AEA, and DE for the Iowa Alliance, all focused on developing effective practices for student data privacy, in our case, in Iowa. So leaders for the alliance are identified, and this was done. Jay said, thank you to the AEA system. This wouldn't be happening had Jay not come to the media directors with this idea in the first place. Needing some help to do some lifting, but also bringing some resources along. And I think you may have heard Jay mention that the cost for Iowa districts is being underwritten by the Iowa DE, at least for now. That's a huge thing. That means that we're not going to be asking LEAs or any of you to write a check immediately, yet we're still going to try to put together something that's meaningful for you. So leaders, Jay at the Department of Ed, the Iowa AEA media directors talked about this and decided that this is both relevant and important work and decided to put some resources behind it. And from that, we assembled a team, which I'll share with you in just a few minutes. And the other thing that you should know is that alliances, the Iowa Alliance, will interact with other alliances, and we've already begun to do that. We've had conversations with Illinois, as Jay mentioned. They have one of the oldest alliances and some of the most mature work in this space. The state of California, same. A couple of alliances in California, actually the state of Utah and some others. So we're already beginning to learn from others so that we're not recreating the wheel. And as issues come forward as state alliances, those rise through the ranks to the national level. And then as one of the goals was to leverage the alliances in order to create change with the vendor community, we can make that happen. So next slide. So as Jay alluded to, it's way over half now, by the way, Jay. It's 35 states participating. I think when we started this, when we jumped on board, I think, and that's not that long ago, about a year ago, I think it was 26. So I think there's been 9 state alliances that have been added just during this year alone. 4 countries participating, 35 states. Resources in the registry, those are documents, signed documents in the registry that all members have access to. 87 participating vendors, and I think this is what's really important. When you are working with a vendor, especially one of the nationally known educational technology or student information system vendors, it's likely they're one of those 87 already. And if there's not, there is some reason for them to become a member, because they would be just joining their other vendor colleagues in a community to make this work well for everyone. Approaching 11,000 school districts now, and then the 67,000 data privacy agreements. These are agreements entered into by entities like school districts with vendors that outline the specific language around student data privacy. And of course, 34 million students affected now under this umbrella. So a really, really good start for SDPC nationally, and we feel like we're not joining just at the beginning of something. We'll be jumping in at the middle and being able to accelerate faster that way. So the alliance formation in Iowa, Iowa DE, Iowa AEAs. So the Iowa AEA media directors, along with Jay, realized that we couldn't do all the work ourselves. So we have a partnership between these two entities. ITEC has joined now as a pseudo partner in helping us get the word out about this. There was a session that was offered at the most recent conference as well, and we anticipate potentially using ITEC as a venue for training and those types of things for districts as well, maybe workshop sessions, things like that. So ITEC will definitely be a partner as well. Next slide, you'll see that the Iowa Department of Ed and AEAs are going to participate and interact with the Alliance and other Alliance projects. We're going to convene stakeholders. We're going to develop wording, and we've already done some of this work around creating a governance structure and also reviewing the National Data Privacy Agreement published by SDPC. And we're in the stages of adopting that for use across Iowa. So you would have literally, a contract, a data privacy contract to offer to vendors without having to engage your lawyers to do that or to have to make up something on your own. And then last but not least, we'll be an advocacy group for student data privacy issues, both regionally and locally in Iowa, but also nationally and internationally, honestly. So the folks involved, you'll notice some AEA people. You'll notice Jay and I are on the list here. We also thought that some LEA voices at the table were critical. So we sought out a large school district in Iowa, one of the UEN districts, and that's Iowa City. See Adam Kurth, who's the CIO for Iowa City Community School District. We were looking for kind of one of those middle-sized school districts, and Indianola came forward, and Ray Coffey volunteered to do some work on this committee. We thought that a small Iowa district, there's so many small districts in Iowa, HSTW, which is a district here in Southwest Iowa, and Ryan Smith is the tech director there. He's been helping, so that's our LEA representatives on the student information side. A really smart person came forward and said, you know what? Teacher librarians in Iowa carry a lot of the water on this stuff. So here comes Joanna freaking Smith from Storm Lake as a teacher librarian representative on the team. And then the AEA representatives, Matt from Central Rivers and Daryl from Heartland, obviously myself from Green Hills. That has been the core team putting this together. There's one important name missing, and that's Sally Lindgren. And I took Sally off today. As a matter of fact, she's retiring at the end of the month. And she should be on this list because she has done a lot of work over the past year to help get this thing up and running. But I didn't want to confuse you or have you sending emails to somebody who is no longer checking their email because they're off doing fun stuff. So Sally deserves lots of credit for being a member of this team as well. So what have we done so far? Back in November, this idea was brought forward from the DE through the Iowa AEA media directors. We worked on, thought it was a good enough idea that we started to work on it, created some structure around it initially, including inviting some of those participants. We've created a governance structure, not unlike any other organization. We needed some bylaws and rules of governance, so those have been created. The National Data Privacy Agreement, the NDPA, has been adopted for Iowa by our alliance group. And what that means is that that contract or that agreement that's been created nationally as a model or boilerplate data sharing agreement or data privacy agreement has been adopted for Iowa use. And here's another place where Jay has been very helpful. He's been able to negotiate the use of the Department of Education's attorneys to look this over. And my understanding, we'll be able to continue to do that for at least the foreseeable future. So rather than having to engage in an expensive legal review, we were able to leverage experts at the Iowa Department of Education, another in-kind contribution by the Iowa Department of Ed. We're also running this past a couple of other groups, the Iowa Association of School Board Attorneys and the Iowa Association of School Business Officials. That's ongoing right now, will be done in the not too distant future. So your school business officers will know about it. The lawyers who represent you as school board attorneys will know about it in the near future. And now you know about it because you're on the webinar. One of the first things we did as a group is develop a software or app best practice flowchart. We need a new X app to do whatever function, or an application has been brought forward by a teacher or an instructional leader. And what do you do? How do you vet that? So one of the first things we've created is a flow chart that kind of walks you through the best practice of what to do when somebody brings forward the latest free app from the Chrome Web Store, from the iTunes Store that everybody wants to use. What is it that we should be looking at in terms of privacy and vetting that application for approval? Do we need to find a data privacy agreement and have that signed with that vendor? Is there one that already exists? Those types of things. And then last but not least, we have two simultaneous, we're using Agile Scrum. So that EPIC term is an Agile Scrum term, but we have two simultaneous EPICs underway, one working on training and onboarding. Synonymous, one comes before the other, chicken and the egg. We weren't sure which one came first, so we're working on them at the same time. And then the other thing that we're doing is creating a comprehensive or a somewhat comprehensive software and app inventory for Iowa. And we have a separate team working on that. So which vendors are in Iowa? Which of those vendors already have data privacy sharing agreements signed potentially in other states, and that kind of work. So those two things are going on simultaneously. The one that impacts you probably the most initially is training and onboarding. We're hoping to wrap that work up by the end of the summer or very, very early fall at the latest, so that we would be able to take your interest from watching the webinar today and turn that into a membership in the Iowa Alliance, which would include some training so you know what it is that you're getting and what you're supposed to do, and then also what's required of you. So training and onboarding to make it possible for your district to become a member of the Iowa Alliance. And as Jay mentioned, at this point, we're not going to be asking you to write a check or spend any money initially, because the DE is underwriting that cost with the national organization. Next slide. So the Iowa Alliance is going to support you in three different ways. The registry access. So when you're vetting an application or a software program, it's likely other districts, either in Iowa or across the United States, are also, engaged in business with that company. So you are able to go to the registry, which is really a giant data warehouse of all of the applications that are being used in all the districts across the United States. And what is posted there are the data privacy agreements and any addendums to those agreements that were created. Now, keep in mind, some states have different requirements than Iowa. So it's not like you can just, take an agreement from Utah and say, do it, because it may have been modified in some way for Utah, but it does give you a starting place at least. You might be able to say to a vendor, hey, listen, I know that you signed an agreement with Salt Lake City schools with a student data privacy agreement. And in Iowa, we're doing something similar. Here's ours. Let's get the process started to get this done. Obviously, there's the legal part. Jay and the Department of Ed has been, very forthcoming in offering the attorneys at the DE, when available, to look at and offer things. That doesn't mean they're going to become the lawyer for all of your school districts, but it does give us, a place to, vet attachments and the data privacy agreement itself, and also work with all of the school board, all of the attorneys that represent you through the Iowa Association of School Board Attorneys. And then last but not least, training. And Jay and I just talked about this the other day. There's lots and lots of things that we need to make more apparent and more obvious and more create layers or scaffolds of support for school districts, because there is a lot to know in terms of student data privacy and all of the legal parts that go into that, but also just best practices in your district to go along with your cybersecurity strategy and anything else that you're doing in your district to keep the information of your students safe. So we will continue to not just create onboarding trainings, but also additional trainings for you that are time appropriate or just in time, when, whatever issue may come forward, hoping that the Iowa Alliance can put together statewide trainings for everybody to bring people up to speed on what the requirements are in Iowa and across the nation. And then what's the Alliance doing to lead and support districts? Well, first of all, this registry we've talked about, if you asked our friends in Illinois what they would have done differently, they would have been a little more careful about what got into the registry in Illinois. They're pretty forthcoming about that. They're, how document management gets away from you and then it's away from you, being really, really purposeful in how we monitor the quality of the site registry in Iowa so that stays really, really relevant and doesn't become messy and unusable. And second of all, ongoing assistance with, questions and feedback with, for example, that flow chart. What do I do when somebody comes forward with a new application or software that they want to use in the district? Responding to members' requests for assistance for things like data privacy agreements or vendor partner issues, being able to leverage, again, the partnerships that we've created, knowing that these vendors have likely signed an agreement either in Iowa or in another state with another school district, and being able to, bring to bear, that force when working with vendors on data privacy issues. And then last but not least is to be an advocate, to be advocating for members, Iowa members at the national level, and creating an Iowa list of planks to the platform to bring forward essentially to the national meetings. Most recently, there was a national meeting, and Jay Pennington attended along with Adam Kurth, and they were able to represent Iowa in DC with the total weight of the National Data Privacy Consortium behind that. So next steps, what is it that's going to happen next? The one thing I don't ever want to do is overpromise and underdeliver. One of the things that we're working towards as hard as we can as a small work group is having the initial onboarding process and training ready to onboard districts later this fall. And I don't know if that's September 1st or October 1st, but definitely in the fall before we turn over to winter. And additional communications, obviously, through our Iowa AEA communications channels, the Iowa DE communications channels. But if you want to be on the list right now, if you are interested in getting your name on that list, so first, and you can be one of the first districts that's onboarded and trained, there is a link in the slides. The slides are shared. They will be shared. That link is hot now. You would be able to click and add your name and district affiliation to that mailing list so that as we ramp up and we're ready to launch the Iowa Alliance, we'll be able to do that with you first. You can be one of the first ones to join. So those are next steps. Behind the scenes, that work group continues to work on establishing a few more processes and making sure that everything's ready to roll out in a 1.0 or maybe a beta version for everybody, especially for early adopters. And we look forward to working with all of you, anybody who's interested in helping improve the conversation and the performance around student data privacy in Iowa. So Jay and I will answer all the questions you have until Lynn and Dan tell us time's up.
I think I'll we will make sure that we drop that link to that slide deck and the link to the form, more importantly, into the chat. And, one of the things I have to say is thank you. I appreciate all of the work that the consortium has put together, because as I listen in, of course, my bias, I have to give a shout out to the fact that you invited a teacher librarian to the table, because as a former teacher librarian, of course, I greatly appreciate that. But one thing, just listening to all of this work and just having that sense of relief that you don't have to go it alone. And that's the point of the Alliance and the consortium, is that, as you said, Dave, not having to know all the things and having that collective mindset to be able to help build that best practice. And hey, these are the things that you need to be looking for and considering, and to know that there's a place that you can go, that some things are already vetted for you. That is such a tremendous relief. That is absolutely incredible. So giving a shout out. Dan, as you were watching, do we have any questions in the chat?
No, nothing's come across the chat. It's been a very quiet group today. So
I just got a direct message from one of those teacher librarians. Has the Iowa Association of School Librarians, IASL, been approached? And no, but now we've got that as a note, and why wouldn't we? So thanks, Susan, for bringing that forward.
There's nothing like in sparking a conversation, security, privacy isn't something like, it's not just like a conversation starter. Of course, I'm kidding. I think it takes a special person to really appreciate the nuances of how big and how complex it is. And we're starting with the sort of legal agreements, because that's really what sort of undergirds everything that happens with student data. But we know, and we sort of alluded to this, and we don't want to make this too big like right away, so we're not actually able to accomplish the original goals. But I just wanted to state, while we are focused on the legal agreements as the starting place, then moving that into the registry, having a set of policies and procedures for districts to be able to even use each other as a leverage point for what's happening in your district, to say like, hey, so these other districts are all, they've got a whole process set around app review, etc. There's a tremendous amount that really we could be doing as a state related to security, privacy, etc. So this is what I'm hoping is the beginning of a much larger set of accomplishments, that we can get done in the coming years.
I was going to say thank you again to Lynn and Dan and ITEC, specifically because ITEC will be, one coming together place for people in this arena that we can leverage a couple of times a year when we're together anyway, to provide additional information and training and onboarding, and also to listen to the voices who want to bring forth other ideas, other things that the Iowa Alliance can be working on as this thing grows. And as Jay said, we're going to try to get it off the ground first. And then once we have a little bit of momentum, we will be happy to allow it to grow and mature into something that's great for everyone.
Excuse me, Dave and Jay, I do have a question. Is the cost of loss or privacy of PII being factored or calculated along here? Just somebody that sent a direct message to me is trying to find a why to get others to understand why this is so important, which I think is one of those things that I have encountered in talking about this, especially with those teachers that, like you said earlier in your presentation, they just want this new cool app that's going to help them be such better teachers and all of that. But what they don't realize is on the back end that there's some company that's mining all their students' data and selling it. So is some of that being factored in, or is it calculated? Is there some numbers that can help us as we present this to our people, why this is a big deal?
I don't know about the calculus specifically of creating a number in aggregate. My own personal experience is that our cybersecurity insurance providers are becoming more and more aware. There's more and more underwriting being done now. And if a district is able to articulate a very clear student data privacy strategy and membership in the state alliance, and can present their data privacy agreements that they have signed with the vendors they work with, that has to help with money, what it costs to underwrite the insurance, the same way adding something like multi-factor authentication does. So that's my thinking. And how to quantify it into an exact dollar amount, I don't know. Jay, I'll let you take a stab at that. But there is definitely both an opportunity cost and an actual dollar cost of a data breach, for sure.
So one other, go ahead, Jay.
No, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to add to what Dave was saying. I don't know of any like model out there that can quantify, what is this going to cost in terms of the loss of that information or to the individual. It only takes a data breach for leadership to really, understand the importance. So it's really those qualitative stories. One of the individuals at the national level, individual I know in Washington State, they were just locked down in a ransomware incident like 2 years ago. Luckily they did have a really good plan, and they're a well-resourced district, and we're as prepared as you can be for something like that. Unfortunately, and I know we're talking to tech folks, right? So you're the ones that are having the conversations really with folks that aren't willing to put the resources, or maybe perhaps don't recognize the importance of it. But it's not if, it's when and how these things are going to happen. I was just talking about it from an individual within Iowa that recently, their district under had a ransomware attack, and their vendor ended up paying the ransom because it was cheaper than losing it. So I think some of those anecdotal pieces can really help for folks to really realize the importance, and thus allocate at least some of the resources needed to do it right.
So I wanted just to make sure that I'm understanding. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing the links to the slideshow and then the direct link to the form. And that form, if we fill that out, that is just an interest. We're just showing that we are interested. We want to be kept apprised of things, and we're not committing a school district to anything by filling that out, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Dan. It's just an interest form. I hope to start generating maybe a bi-monthly, every other month email with an update as to where we are, what the timelines are, and also acknowledging for districts who are interested that, it's coming and this is the timeline. And then once we are ready to roll, we'll have a list of those early adopters who are willing to get on board and help right away. And if you're not one of them, you can stay interested for a while and watch from the sidelines until you're ready to jump in. No.
And just to take it a step further and to be more explicit, all of this is voluntary. We're doing this because we think it's important work. It's not going to be the case where there's some state mandate to say you have to use an agreement that's in the registry. If you don't want to use it, you don't want to use it. I think at some point there's a life cycle to any of these systems that we implement in the district, or even at the state level. And And therefore, when that student information system is going to get replaced, or when we decide to, implement an LMS within our district, starting with, and we don't have the repository populated at this point. We're still in process of getting the actual first version of the Iowa State Agreement in place. What Dave alluded to, whether it's the Association of School Officials or Association of Attorneys, the point in engaging those groups is certainly to build awareness, but from the attorney perspective, get a wider set of eyes on the agreement to ensure that, hey, if I'm working with a particular school district as a client, does this agreement look like one that I would agree to? And so pressure test that with crowdsource it with a wider set of legal minds. I think there's a joke in there somewhere, but I'll just keep moving. That there'll be enough in the registry and available for you to be able to look up, X app that Dave mentioned, so that when that teacher comes to you, or when that administrator says, hey, I want this system, the power of the group and that resource that's available in the registry is one that you can leverage. So point is, there'll be enough value to wanting to participate, but it's all, based on your decision in your district.
All right, we're going to practice the pause, which sometimes in this digital space is a little bit difficult, but just again, inviting anyone if you have any additional questions. But again, you do have access to the slide deck with both Dave and Jay's contact information, as well as that interest form, if you're wanting to continue to gather more information as this comes along. But I just, again, have to reiterate and just say thank you. Again, former teacher librarian, and I think about just even the power in being able to raise awareness and have conversations with other educators about that. Basically, it's modeling good digital citizenship. I mean, it's living and breathing, and it's in a capacity that sometimes we don't always think about. And so helping raise awareness of, especially in a school district, you do have an obligation to be aware of what you're doing with that information for your students and wanting to protect them, just as we would in a physical environment. We want to definitely make sure that we're being mindful and intentional in a digital space as well. So I just think there's continued opportunity to build that awareness and have those conversations as well. So thank you. All right, so continuing to pause just a second, and as it seems as though nobody's dropping any additional questions in. But again, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate your time, Dave and Jay, your time especially, sharing all of the work that's been done and where things are going, and helping, again, build awareness that, again, those of you who have ever worked with me, I live my life by inspirational phrases. And so that whole idea of, sharing is caring, and that we're better together, and just knowing that you don't have to go it alone as we navigate this space. So thank you everyone very, very much. And we'll stay on for just a few more moments in case somebody does want to ask any questions. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.